Have you ever felt stuck in an emotional cycle that seems endless? Do you ever feel like you're trapped in an emotional cycle, repeating the same patterns over and over, even though you know they don't help? Maybe it's that argument you swear you won't have again, yet it resurfaces days later, bringing the same frustration. It's as if these reactions are on autopilot, like someone else is pulling the strings of your emotions, not you. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. We all have emotional patterns that we've developed over time. They didn't just appear out of nowhere. They're like well-trodden paths we've walked so often that they've become our default route. It's not about weakness or lack of willpower. It's about how our brain operates. Today, we'll dive into why this happens, how these patterns affect us, and, most importantly, what we can do to break free from them. Let's start by understanding emotional addictions and how they influence our reactions. Imagine your emotions as trails in a forest. Each time you respond to a situation in the same way, it's like walking down the same path. The more you take that path, the more defined and easier it becomes to follow. Emotional addictions work just like this. They are patterns of emotional reactions that your brain has learned and repeats because they've become deeply ingrained. Here's the tricky part. Even when these reactions hurt us, we still tend to repeat them. Not because we want to, but because our brain, shaped by past experiences, sticks to what's familiar. Gabor Mate, a renowned physician and author, explains that emotional addictions often begin as coping mechanisms for past traumas. When we experience pain, we learn to react in ways that temporarily ease that discomfort. For example, a child who grew up hearing constant criticism might develop a pattern of reacting with anger when they feel judged, even if the criticism isn't actually harmful. It's as if their brain says, "This reaction worked to protect me before, so I'll do it again." In everyday situations, these patterns can manifest in ways we don't always notice. Take someone who constantly seeks validation on social media. Each like or comment provides a brief sense of relief, but the need for approval quickly returns, perpetuating the cycle. Or think of someone who avoids tough conversations out of fear of rejection. They might feel relieved in the moment for dodging discomfort, but the unresolved issue eventually resurfaces, reinforcing their avoidance habit. A common example is reacting with anger to criticism. How often does someone overreact to feedback that could actually be constructive? This happens because the brain associates criticism with feelings of threat, triggering an automatic reaction. These behaviors may feel inevitable, but the good news is, they don't have to be permanent. So, if these patterns harm us, why do we keep repeating them? This leads us to the next question. Why does our brain insist on following these paths, even when we know they're detrimental? The brain is like a conductor who prefers to play the same piece over and over because it knows the melody well. It seeks predictability, even when that predictability causes harm. Reacting repetitively to certain situations becomes a kind of emotional comfort zone. Not because it feels good, but because we already know how to navigate that path. This tendency is rooted in how our brain learns. Let's consider the concept of reinforcement, introduced by psychologist B.F. Skinner. Reinforcement, simply put, is the idea that if something brings us relief or comfort, even briefly, the brain registers it as an effective solution and stores it for future use. It's as if the brain says, "Oh, that worked. Let's do it again next time." For example, imagine you're in an argument and you feel intense anger. Yelling might release some of that built-up tension in your body, even though it doesn't solve the issue. Your brain interprets the act of yelling as an efficient way to relieve stress. The next time you feel anger, your brain will likely steer you toward yelling again, reinforcing this pattern. It's not because it's good for you, but because your brain prioritizes immediate relief. Another example is avoiding uncomfortable situations, like confronting someone about a problem. Avoiding the conversation provides temporary relief. You didn't have to face the discomfort in that moment. This relief acts as a reward for your brain, which learns to avoid similar situations whenever possible. However, in the long run, avoidance only creates bigger issues and increases the fear of confrontation. This is how emotional patterns become automatic. Every small reaction that eases discomfort reinforces the behavior, creating a cycle that's hard to break. Our brain acts like a pilot on autopilot, always choosing the route that seems safest and quickest, without considering the long-term consequences. But it is possible to recognize these cycles and turn off autopilot. So how can we identify emotional addictions in our daily lives? Identifying emotional addictions is like trying to spot a habit we do automatically, like cracking our knuckles or checking our phone for no real reason. Often, we're so used to reacting in certain ways that we don't notice the pattern behind our actions. The first step to breaking these cycles is to start observing, with curiosity, the emotional reactions that seem to appear out of nowhere. A good starting point is to pay attention to reactions that feel exaggerated or out of context. For instance, if you feel intensely irritated by something minor, like someone forgetting to inform you about a plan, there might be deeper layers of emotion at play. This type of disproportionate response is one of the clearest signs that an emotional pattern is in action. Another way to notice these cycles is to reflect on behaviors you keep repeating, even though you know they don't serve you. Maybe you frequently avoid important conflicts or constantly seek validation from others to feel worthy. These patterns often show up in everyday situations, leaving you feeling emotionally stuck, as though you're being carried along by circumstances without the ability to respond differently. One straightforward way to identify these cycles is to take small moments throughout your day for reflection. Ask yourself, why did I react this way? Was there something specific that triggered this emotion? What happened after I acted like that? Answering these questions creates a space for you to observe your emotional triggers and how they shape your actions, even if the answers aren't immediately clear. This exercise helps build greater awareness of your emotions. If you want to delve deeper, keeping an emotional journal can be a powerful tool. In it, record moments when intense emotions surfaced. Simply writing down what you felt, what happened beforehand, and how you reacted can help uncover hidden patterns. As you gather these insights, it's like piecing together a puzzle, revealing the bigger picture of your emotional cycles. Noticing these patterns is the first step toward meaningful change. However, to understand how they began and why they feel so automatic, it's necessary to look at their origins. Emotional addictions don't appear out of nowhere. They're like the roots of a tree, invisible on the surface, but deeply connected to the soil of our history. These roots are often tied to past experiences, particularly those marked by pain, rejection, or a lack of emotional support. While we often associate trauma with extreme events, Gabor Mate reminds us that it can also stem from subtle, repeated experiences, such as constant criticism or feeling inadequate. For instance, a child who grew up being compared to others might develop a pattern of striving for perfection in everything they do, not because they want to, but because they learned it was necessary to be accepted. Another example is someone who experienced rejection as a child and grows up avoiding any conversation involving conflict, fearing a resurgence of that pain. These behaviors aren't conscious choices. They're defense mechanisms that our brain developed to protect us from suffering. These patterns arise from a natural process in the brain. It associates past experiences with intense emotions and tries to prevent that pain from happening again. It's as if the brain builds emotional shortcuts, programming automatic reactions to situations that even remotely resemble the original trauma. However, these shortcuts can trap us, making us react to the present as though it were an extension of the past. It's important to note that emotional addictions aren't anyone's fault. They're a reflection of how we learn to survive in environments that didn't always provide emotional safety. For example, someone who grew up being told to stop crying might suppress their emotions to the point of being unable to handle them in a healthy way later in life. Similarly, someone who constantly had to fight to be heard might struggle to trust others' intentions, reacting defensively even in calm situations. Understanding where these patterns come from is a powerful step forward. It's not about blaming the past, but about approaching it with curiosity and compassion. This understanding is like turning on a light in a dark room. It helps us see what was once invisible. From this place of clarity, we can begin to build new ways of responding, ones no longer guided solely by the wounds of our past. Emotional addictions leave profound marks on how we live and relate to others. Even if we don't immediately recognize their influence, it's like wearing glasses with tinted lenses. They distort our view of the world, but over time, we get used to seeing everything through that filter. The impact of these patterns goes far beyond emotions. They affect our self-esteem, relationships, and even the life choices we make. On a personal level, emotional addictions can make it harder to build healthy relationships. Impulsive reactions, such as disproportionate anger or an overwhelming need to please others, create barriers to genuine connection. Imagine someone who, out of fear of rejection, avoids being vulnerable with friends or partners. This person may come across as distant or indifferent, when, in reality, they are simply trying to protect themselves. The problem is that this self-protection also prevents them from forming authentic bonds. In the professional world, the impact is just as significant. Automatic behaviors like responding defensively to criticism or avoiding challenges out of fear of failure can hinder opportunities for growth. Consider a situation where someone, feeling challenged, reacts aggressively during a meeting. This response might alienate colleagues and create a more difficult work environment. On the other hand, someone who avoids responsibilities due to insecurity might be seen as disengaged, even though their true intention is to avoid the risk of failure. In daily life, these emotional patterns show up in small ways. It might be that constant feeling of guilt, even without a clear reason, or the habit of mentally replaying past situations, trying to figure out what could have been done differently. These subtle repetitions take a toll on our well-being, creating a cycle of frustration that can feel impossible to escape. The impact of emotional addictions can be overwhelming, but it's important to remember that they don't define who we are. They're emotional habits that can be transformed with practice and self-compassion. The first step toward change is recognizing these patterns in action. The next is finding ways to break them and create new emotional pathways. Breaking emotional cycles isn't an instant process, but it's absolutely possible with dedication and consistent small changes. Imagine you're redesigning a path you've walked hundreds of times. You can't erase the old trail, but you can build a new one, healthier and more aligned with your goals. This transformation starts with simple yet powerful practices that help redirect automatic reactions. One of the first strategies is mindfulness. This practice involves observing your emotions and thoughts without judgment, like a spectator. When you feel anger, sadness, or anxiety, instead of reacting immediately, try pausing for a few seconds. Ask yourself, what's really bothering me? This small moment of reflection creates a space between the emotional trigger and your response, allowing you to choose how to act, rather than simply reacting. Another effective approach is gradual behavioral reprogramming. This means making small, intentional changes in your daily actions, one step at a time. For example, if your usual reaction to conflict is to avoid the conversation, try, just once, expressing your point of view in a calm and direct way. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but each successful attempt reinforces the new emotional pattern. Much like a forest trail becomes clearer with each step taken. Seeking help is also a fundamental strategy. Therapy, support groups, or even honest conversations with close friends can provide fresh perspectives on your emotional patterns. A therapist, for instance, can help uncover the roots of these cycles and work with you to develop personalized strategies for change. Recognizing that you don't have to face this alone is an important step in building new emotional pathways. Finally, it's crucial to remember that transforming emotional patterns is a journey, not a destination. Every small step forward is a victory, even if it feels insignificant at the time. What matters is the intention to create a more conscious and balanced life. Breaking emotional patterns involves more than just identifying and interrupting the cycles. It also requires building a solid foundation to sustain these changes. This is where emotional resilience comes in, the ability to navigate adversity in a healthy way without letting it define you. Imagine your emotions as a garden. Tending to it regularly ensures that flowers continue to grow, even when weeds try to take over. One of the pillars of emotional resilience is self-care. This goes beyond practices like meditation or relaxation. Although they are important, self-care means recognizing what you need to feel whole and balanced. Whether it's setting boundaries in relationships or making time for activities that nourish your mind and body, such as exercise or quiet reflection. Another powerful tool is learning to accept emotions as a natural part of the human experience. It's not about ignoring unpleasant feelings, but embracing them without judgment. Think of it as watching a storm pass through a window. You don't try to stop it, but you know it's temporary. This perspective helps reduce emotional overwhelm and prevents difficult situations from consuming your day. Building resilience also involves daily practices that strengthen your ability to respond to challenges in a balanced way. Establishing simple routines like acknowledging small wins or practicing mindful breathing can make a significant difference over time. Each small, conscious choice is like watering the garden of your emotions, ensuring it stays healthy even in the face of storms. Resilience doesn't mean being unshakable, but being flexible. It's the ability to adapt and recover when things don't go as planned. Developing this inner strength takes practice and patience, but it allows you to live more fully, facing challenges with greater confidence. Breaking emotional patterns is a path that requires patience, but begins with small, consistent steps. It might be the decision to observe your reactions more closely, or the effort to take a deep breath before responding impulsively. The important thing is to remember that every attempt matters. It's not about getting it right every time, but about being present and willing to learn. I'd like to take a moment to thank you for making it this far. Your presence makes all the difference. Knowing that you've dedicated time and attention to this shows how much you care about yourself, and it reinforces the value of the space we've created together. Each comment you leave makes me feel that this work is more than just sharing ideas. It's a genuine exchange. And even though I may not be able to respond to everyone, I read every word with care. You bring life, inspiration, and warmth to this space. It's as if each message is a small spark that lights up my heart and gives me strength to keep going. If something in this resonated with your story, know that it's a sign that the process of transformation has already begun. You don't have to change everything at once. The most important thing is to start somewhere. Allow yourself to make mistakes, to start over, and most importantly, to move forward at your own pace. Remember, you're not alone. Every step you take toward a more conscious and balanced life is an act of courage. Your presence, your support, and your energy here make all the difference. That's what keeps this space so special and meaningful. So, my heart is full of gratitude for you. Thank you for being here, for supporting, and for building this journey with me. Together, we continue learning and growing. Until next time.